getting dark, too dark to see. I feel I'm knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
The challenge is to develop a common language, right?
Right. I think that at the same time, we do have to understand that there is going to be some conflict. I mean, I think it's unavoidable. I think it can even be a really good thing because, for example, as long as we do it right. So we do need teams of pure atheists debating, strict theists. You know what I mean? But at the same time, there needs to be another voice to sort of provide a better solution, because if the pure atheists got their way, their solutions would expire as well.
Right. Yeah, I think that's 100% accurate, because it's the notion that I've come to subscribe to is the tension of opposites is the spawning ground for creativity.
And it's entertaining to watch a theist get completely torn apart by an intelligent atheist.
Well, where would they need material? They need an opposing force to generate some kind of tension or friction that spawns this, this spark of genius, if you want to call it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be comedy without some kind of opposing force that they could objectify and be so rational about.
Which makes me wonder about the sort of necessity of violence in general for evolution to take place. Maybe. Because if we're talking about the evolution of consciousness, right? Mm-hmm. And we're talking about it as if it were just this natural progression of the way human beings in large groups evolve, right? So when we look at like the way Christianity led Western Europe to just begin colonizing the rest of the world, is that an expression of the evolution of consciousness, or is that some sort of a cancerous growth that's driven by egocentric and delusional Christian religious dogma? Because you can see how it's like this allowed, we wouldn't have been aware of the planet as a whole unless that very violent colonization took place, So it's a double-edged sword, isn't it?
I think our reaction to that violence is the same as our reaction to all change. It's like the first noble truth. Change can be considered, destruction. And I think there's naturally going to be, a cleansing. I think as long as we're in this world, there's going to be a sort of purging of, people who aren't able to have access to this proper solutions. But, that's the whole aim of, people who are thinking holistically, is to sort of save, to use a metaphor, to save those people.
Yeah.
And I noticed that, I remember I started, after I was out of that phase of atheism that I stayed in for a little while, that I was sort of drawn to the Theosophical Society, and their writings and their whole mission, and it uses the same symbols and metaphors as the rest of the world religions. It just takes a more symbolic view of them, and if you look at certain progressive Christian or progressive Islamic outlets, you'll see that, they killed a whole bunch of people, but that's symbolic now for something else. They have to adjust their solutions if they're going to survive.
Well, it seems that something like Theosophy, or even I'm not sure if you're familiar with Rudolf Steiner's Anthroposophy, which it broke off of Theosophy, but it was very, Steiner's philosophy was very Christian, but like you're saying, he recognized that there's an esoteric, not only symbolic but just initiatory level at which the Christian story can be understood. And it seems that, you know, we should be very skeptical of any attempt to label a particular religion as being somewhere along the spectrum, when really it's the way that the religion is brought to life by individuals and communities right now.
Exactly. And also that speaks to archetypes, not only archetypes of characters, but archetypes of entire stories. Like the whole Jesus story has been repeated elsewhere in other civilizations.
Right.
And I think that with the initiation, and I also like studied whole initiation rituals at a certain point when I was getting to like NLP and how you use sort of your consciousness.
Programming, is that NLP?
Yeah, neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
It's basically how you use language, and by language, you know, I mean even visions that you see or anything like patterns, habits. Those are all types of language, and how to use that to sort of achieve the aim of the certain mystical traditions like Buddhism.
Yeah.
And I remember I studied some initiation rituals where they sort of ritualized the whole death and, you know, rebirth of a god, and that's very similar across many civilizations.
Yeah, it is. The dying and rising god is an archetype that's everywhere. You know, you can't avoid it. Which maybe we can start to wrap it up by going back around to where we began with the shadow.
Yeah.
Because it seems as though you could almost understand it as an archetype. You know, in the way that Carl Jung, the psychologist, talked about archetypes, they're unconscious, first of all. So when you're dealing with an archetype like the shadow, you can never fully have it materialize before you so that you can examine it. It's always, by definition, what's hidden from view, right? So how does that realization factor into someone's attempt to come to terms with the shadow? You know, it's because if it's unconscious, how is the ego to relate to it? You know, without, it would seem that the ego can't, so maybe we need a new psychic center other than the ego.
Right. Well, can I add something real quick to give you a little bit more context, Malcolm? I think if we're going to address this, we do have to have a more linear kind of view, practical, I think, in this sense. For like, if you take the position of an archaeologist and you're looking at footprints, like dinosaur footprints. So if you're looking at shadow footprints and you look at in the past, and based on what you've seen, you can kind of project into the future, but you can never really go in the now and become one with it in this linear. That by definition, it's a linear view, so you're not going to be in this ever-present nowness.
Right.
So you use this past experiences and you objectify and disassociate categorically from the past, because I think that's healthy for practical reasons. But it's when people disassociate from this now, this present, is when unhealthy things kind of happen, and the unconditional, you know, underlying shadow emerges from that. And it's always hidden in the now, but it's more obvious in the past, and then from that we make predictions to practically navigate the future. Is that accurate in your eyes, Malcolm, on this kind of what we do about the shadow issue? And the shadow is this self that we disassociate. It's this self that we fundamentally don't identify with because we are bothered by it. It makes us feel icky, you know. Or it's not. It can never be me.
You're trying to relate it to time, though. You're saying that the shadow emerges because of the way we relate to the past.
In some sense, I'm saying to address it. Like I'm addressing your question. How do we address it?
Yeah.
I say we can't address it now because, like you say, it's hidden. But in the past, we can see the footprints in a sense, and we can objectify those. Right. I want to see how much you and Malcolm agree on that, and if that's the way to address this thing. And from that, do we make these predictions, and can we trust those predictions about the future?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lot of stuff.
Sorry, I mean it's a lot of stuff, but I mean it seems like the only thing you can do really is you go off of your past, the stubborn facts of the past. Like this is what's going on. We can objectify the
If
past.
we're gonna, I mean, to simplify all of it is how does the ego come to relate to the shadow?
Mhm.
Where would you begin with that? You know?
Sure.
How does the ego come to relate to the shadow? I would say that in general, the less dogmatic that one person is, you know, the more room for a spontaneous relationship can occur.
Mhm.
And really, I think the problem happens when we reflect and add on top of, you know, our experience. You know, I think that there's a lot to say for just really accepting everything
My
as it is.
guns in the ground. I can't shoot them anymore.